Hey, welcome back. I'm V. This is Experience Design Podcast, episode number 12. And I have a special guest today, Dan Saffer. And you probably know about Dan, or maybe if you followed my content before, I called out multiple times his framework, which is now a good 16 years old or so, but still super relevant, which is called UX Disciplines. Dan is also an author of multiple books which you might have read. For example, Micro Interactions has been one of the books I read in the past in my development, and he has worked in a lot of different agency and big tech name brands and so forth. And currently he's working with the students at Carnegie Mellon University, and he's teaching courses on designing for AI. This is exactly what we're going to discuss today. We're going to deep dive into the UX industry, into what you should learn to design with AI, what you should keep in mind, where the shortcomings are. We're also going to give a few different examples of AI done right, AI done not so right, and we're going to kind of unpack it all at once. So tune in for the next hour. If you enjoy this episode, make sure to share, give thumbs up on whatever platform you're watching or listening. And on that note, do enjoy. Let's say I often, even with the people I coach or manage or, talk to, use one of your frameworks, which is the UX disciplines one from, I think, 16 years or so, but still I apply it so often. And I think people benefit to understand, okay, this is the complexity. But on that note, would you mind giving a bit of a story of like, how did you even figure that design was the thing you wanted to pursue in the beginning? Because that's kind of the things which people tend to overlook and jump straight into like current stuff. But I feel like the origin story is always intriguing.
Well, it's funny. My old design professor, Dick Buchanan, used to say that design is like California, that no one is born there. And I really feel that for myself, like that I kind of stumbled into it because I was an English major and a theater major and kind of humanities background. And that's kind of where I thought I was going to go, more into kind of the writing side of things. And I ended up working at a book publisher at the time when the web was taking off. And it was one of those things where it was like, oh, well, do you have a browser? Oh, yes, I have a browser. Well, how would you like to work on our website? Great. Okay. So I ended up kind of self-teaching myself design and some tech to set up the website. It was kind of at the era where there was no books that were then written. So you had to learn, you looked at source code and like taught yourself how to like build pages and set up a SQL database and all this other stuff. So I did that for a number of years. And then after 3 or 4 years doing that, I was like, well, maybe I should probably be trained in this. So that's when I went back to grad school and did grad school for 2 years and then went to work at Adaptive Path right out of grad school. Started my own studio, worked at a number of really great studios like Smart Design, worked at robotics, wearables, social media. I worked at Twitter for almost 4 years, a bunch of different places that were all really interesting. And now I've been teaching design at Carnegie Mellon at the Human-Computer Interaction Institute for the last year. And so that's been a big radical shift in my career, so now I'm back to like doing things like writing and teaching again. So I've sort of come full circle.
Yeah. Is it as difficult to teach, I guess, upcoming students as to teach stakeholders?
No, stakeholders are harder, I think, because stakeholders don't necessarily want to learn how things work. They want to see results. They want to see the end product. They don't want the process, which I get. But my students, for the most part, really want to learn how to do things and how to look at things through a design lens. But you have to go a lot deeper. You have to, for the most part, I'm training people to actually do things with their hands and with their brains. And so having to teach them not just the overall concept, but also how to then apply it. But the actual application and making things with the concepts is what's the real challenge.
Yeah. And I guess since you started doing it so quite recently,
I think it's been a year or so from what I've seen online, right? So congrats on that. But you kind of went from this, I guess, private sector, if I'm correct, from actual tech companies and the horrors there, because, this is what the bread and butter for UX is, that you don't realize how messy the actual making is until you get into that. Like, I wonder, what's your kind of take? Are you trying to prepare the students to those realities? Because the constraints are like ever increasing, and it's almost like once you get to the actual industry, you realize, oh crap, like there's the people element and egos and things of that nature. I wonder, like, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I was really worried about before I started teaching was like, am I going to have enough hope to really inspire students to want to do this job and take this job? And as it turns out, the students give me a lot of hope. That's a real positive. Their energy, their ideas. But yes, I definitely feel like it's my job, certainly not to douse that flame or anything like that, but to definitely, I feel like I'm like handing them like tools and weapons that they can use, when they go out into the trenches of the tech industry, to try to be like, here's what's really happening right now, and here are the things that you're going to encounter in your job, and here's ways that you can start to overcome that. And it's not just the other people right now as well. It's also, kind of the threat of AI taking our jobs. And so also kind of preparing them for like that world where it's like, okay, you're going to have to, work with AI, and some of these low level jobs I think are just going to disappear. So how can you make yourself AI proof and more strategic? Like, how can you become higher up the ladder almost as soon as you get at a place? Because within a couple of years, I just think some of the lower level production level jobs, the jobs where people hand you a Jira ticket and you go and you do the Jira ticket, I think those jobs are going away. The jobs that we are traditionally better at, the more strategic jobs, I think those are going to stick around. And so I think my job is to help prepare people to think more strategically, so that when they get in their workplace, they can start to contribute things that AI is not going to be able to, at least not yet.
Like, I feel also some of that. I'm maybe less fearful because I make it an active effort to consider the limitations, but also like how could I automate myself out of my job? Let's say, if you make that exercise, you realize, yes, there is a lot of change which is ought to happen. But when I hear so many people like at the senior level, let's say, and above as well, I guess quiet afraid, and it's probably more so because of the tech shakeup, the messy layoffs, that drama. That hard to describe how terrible the last like couple of years have been, especially for UX. I feel like it's AI is almost has been, in my perspective at least, it's almost like an add-on to already very messy journey of like a lot of people are facing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the layoffs that we've seen over the last 2 years, really nothing to do with AI at all. They are more about. I mean, sometimes I can't even tell what they're even about anymore. Is it over hiring? Is it just that like everyone's doing it and Wall Street is rewarding us, so therefore we should do it too, even though we have profits? So I think that there's just been this terrible economic anxiety that's happened. And then, and now there's this other one that's kind of coming at us from another direction that I think people are concerned about it, but I'm not seeing a lot of like UX jobs being replaced by AI right now. I don't think that's happening yet, but I do think that is something that we need to, keep our eye on, because I think that will happen within the next 5 years, if not sooner.
You think next? Why do you think that? That's interesting, because I would challenge that. Hey, we're probably going to climb the tasks. We're going to automate specific bits, but I feel like people are going to adapt as we go, or hopefully going to adapt. That's where I'm thinking like the full automation of what we do, I would hope would take like a decade. But what's your take on why do you say 5 years?
I would have agreed with you like a year or so ago. But just I feels like the pace of AI is very rapid, and there's a lot of money being pushed at it. There's a lot of resources being pushed at it, and I think that there are just things that are accelerating the amount of change that AI is capable of, like being able to build things on these foundation models of AI, so that you don't have to create everything from scratch. That's a real accelerator. And some of the issues that prevented things from accelerating are going away. For example, just chips, actual hardware chips. Like, more people are getting into that game, and more people are trying to have more processing power. And so that alone is going to accelerate things. So, I'm thinking within 5 years, there will be something that can do some pretty good UI designs with a UI library, and possibly pretty good flows and stuff too. So I'm thinking there will be things that can generate a set of UI examples and be like, which one of these is good. And I think we're 5 years out from that. I think it's close. I think it's closer than we would like to admit.
Yeah, well, I'm actually kind of falling back to your UX disciplines framework a lot, I think, in my thinking at least, because it's been a foundational in my learning. To do UX properly, you would need to start automating all the different bubbles or all the different areas.
Right.
And, those tasks have to overlap. And of course, it's going to happen. Like, I think it's inevitable. Funnily enough, I think the other day I discovered that it was in the community I run in this design squad. Someone posted this job ad, which was basically looking for people to join this mysterious firm who's trying to basically log the Figma activities of a designer as they design. So you're being paid per hour to train some sort of models of design decisions. And that kind of blew my mind, because I was thinking it would be done more by proxy, where a person would, as a ethnographist, as a UX researcher, sit with you and capture your decisions and then try to train the model over time. But no, it seems like there is a wave of people kind of, being hooked into this. And my hope still is that it's a bit bigger than UI design.
That's the kind of crux of it. If you think of yourself as a UI designer, I think that level of production work may go away or be diminished, or there will be a lot fewer. But I think if you look at UX as a whole thing, a lot of it's not going to be automated. There's a lot of context that you need to understand to make product. There's a lot of common sense that you need to do to make a product. There's a lot of collaboration you need to do to make a product. For designers, there's a lot of taste and aesthetic decisions that need to be done to make a product. So I think those are things that are not going to be easily automated. And you're right. I think that there are tons of pieces of UX. When I think strategy, I think information architecture, I think user research. The insights, the big jumps that people will make. Those things are going to be very difficult for AI to replicate. It's more the things that I think AI can look at, 20,000 different websites and say, okay, here's the layout and navigation style of these. I'm going to give you 10 versions of this. Which one do you think fits your context, better? And say, well, okay, maybe that one does. So I think a lot of those jobs are being done by, that's kind of how you start in the industry, is doing kind of these lower UI level problems versus the kind of harder UX and more strategic problems. So that's why I'm trying to push all my students to think beyond UI and just go deeper into UX, because I think that's the stuff that's going to stick around, in the next 10, 20 years.
That has been my positioning, and I might echo what you said in a way. But one of the call-outs or one of the questions I recently got on one of the content pieces has been that UX might merge into product management or vice versa. Basically, there might be like a fluid transition between the skills, and it has been happening. I'm sure you would agree, where product managers now have almost like expectation one of the skill sets to do UX, or in most lean environments, if you had layoffs, in tech, like product managers tend to do user research as well, like quite deep at that too. Like some good product managers obviously can delegate, but there is also some of that. But I wonder, what's your kind of take in terms of what the future UXer looks like? And is this something where you're also maybe framing it for your students as well? Because I'm sure they are basically years or, maybe semesters away from entering the market.
So I teach both people that are in, undergrad kind of design HCI area, and then I teach master's students in HCI who are mostly going to be designers. And then I also teach students who are coming to us through the Masters of Science of Product Management. So I do teach a lot of product managers as well, and they are learning design. They are learning some design tools. They're learning how to think like designers. Now, do I think that most of them will become designers or replace designers? I'm pretty dubious about that, because I do think that there are aesthetic product decisions that many of them will struggle with. That is not going to be their strength. That's not going to be their strong suit. That's not a hat that they're used to wearing. Whereas I do think that a lot of designers, particularly senior designers, probably may start to merge into some of our graduates even do go into product management. They become product managers. The more that the tools enable that, they will be able to do kind of both jobs, thinking about the product strategically and doing things like user research and stuff like that, trying to find the strategic fit for these products and having an aesthetic sense is I think a really powerful combination. And what people end up calling that role, whether it is a designer or whether it is a product manager, maybe we'll see like a design product manager, the same way that we have engineering product managers or technical product managers. Maybe there'll be something like that too. I tell my students, like, look, when I graduated college, the job that I had didn't exist right now. And probably the job that you're going to have in 20 years, probably that doesn't exist right now either. So who knows what kind of hybrid it is? Maybe it'll be, maybe it'll be some kind of AI trainers or something, something like that. Maybe it'll be like AI managers, something that we can't even foresee yet. If you take out the titles, it's like, what's the important thing for people to know? And it is that kind of like product strategy, understanding context, understanding the users, and being able to rally people around a vision. That stuff is what's really important.
Just the notion of, I think this is almost like a sidebar, but some of my guests on a podcast in UX have called out quite negatively so, or maybe pessimistically so, that they would not get into UX today. Which, I never want to discourage anyone, because I feel like you're always going to need this type of human centricity and kind of design attention to a lot of different problems around. Like, it's unavoidable.
I had to say, like, yeah, of course. They will be fighting very different battles than we fought 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or the people that came, before me that fought like 30 years ago or 40 years ago. Their battles right now are all about how do we keep humanity into the products we're designing, and how do we keep adding value to users and not just extracting more and more value out of them, as I think a lot of businesses are kind of want to do right now. It's like, you see things like, BMW trying to charge people to have heated seats, to have a subscription for heated seats. And it's like, well, how much value can you really extract out of people? And before people are like, enough, like this is too much, like where it ruins the product, it ruins the experience of the product. In the worst case scenario, they're stuck using your product because they have no choice. It's like part of their job or whatever. So I think that's the world that I'm trying to gear my students up for. It's like, how do you win in the kind of, giving people things that they value from the products and services that we're making, versus just, seeing people like human ATM machines that you can just extract more and more money and time and engagement out of. So that it's a tough world to be getting into. I think maybe even more more challenging than previous things when it was just like, can we make this work? Can we get design, can we get design to be a respected profession? Because people are actually using our own tools against us and against our users, right? Can we make this gorgeous, beautiful thing that's very addictive and very seductive, and all it's doing is sucking away your time and money and so, and that's a hard thing to fight. That is a hard thing to fight. So, but I think we need people to fight it. I think we definitely, I think we need people to go in there and be like, what are we doing here? Like, like why is this like this? These giant tech companies are not going away. So the real question is, how can we fight them from inside? Can we make sure that there are people inside who are able to keep human beings in mind and be advocates for them and try to change things for the good when they can?
Like, because I'm trying to almost like step back and see what the industry is doing. And right now, I just looked up the other day the job openings, and every PM job right now is to do with AI, and it's clearly states senior product manager AI, and that's just UK specific. So it's probably even more so in the States, I presume, especially like Silicon Valley. So every PM is going to be oriented in a very tech-heavy, tech-centric mind and ways to solve problems. My presumption, a hypothesis, is that they're going to focus less about the user centricity or kind of like, because it's basically just hiring more tech PMs or technically savvy PMs, and a lot of them probably going to be engineered. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but to me, it's like a clear signal that could create a lot of debt on user centricity, which eventually the pendulum might swing back, where we might get so much demand for UX that we just, we don't have enough hands to basically go and solve all of it. I wonder what's your take.
From your mouth to God's ear. Like, I hope that's the eventual case, that people will be like, wow, that we really need that. We talk a lot at CMU. My colleague John Zimmerman talks a lot about what he calls the innovation gap. And the innovation gap is all about data scientists, engineers, and these technical PMs are proposing these AI projects that are technically challenging, very interesting from a tech point of view, but less interesting and less desirable from a user point of view. They're like, oh, this is really interesting and really hard. I mean, the opposite side of it is that designers are proposing things that are very desirable, but also can't be built. So how do you bridge that gap is a lot that we talk about in our design and AI class. Like, how do you figure out ways for designers to understand what can be built, and ways for the tech people, especially data scientists, to understand what people actually want and where you can find that kind of middle ground. So I think what you're seeing is, a lot of people being put on these, very hard tech problems that something like 80 or 90% of all AI projects fail. That's the statistic that you'll see in like Harvard Business Review and stuff like that. That's the research that we've done, is all like 85 to 90% of AI projects fail. And it's because, they're trying things that are very difficult. So they're very high risk. If you don't get them perfectly, there's a lot of like trust lost, financial damage, emotional damage, all this other stuff. And so, design is either is not involved at all, or they come into, hey, make this pretty, kind of like old school lipstick on a pig style design, when they should be more involved, at the beginning of these projects, to be like, does anyone actually want this? Is this actually valuable to people? What are the risks that we need to mitigate if things go wrong? If the AI is guessing wrong things, how should we be mitigating that on the front end? Are there things that we could look out for, that we could design away? But you're right. I mean, most of there's 1 million jobs in AI right now, and very few of them are in design. All the design jobs seem to be in growth right now, like kind of growth hacking kind of stuff, which to me is,
it's telling of the times, right? Like it's
some of
kind
it
of that, the climate as well. But
I mean, some of growth is fine. Some of it is like, hey, let's fix the onboarding process and stuff like that. Great. but some of it is definitely, it is UX in name only. It is again using the tools of UX completely for business to get more clicks or get drive more engagement, those kinds of things. I don't want to certainly downplay like business value, because I think that's a thing that we should do, but I think in this era a lot of user value is being lost. I think this is the whole kind of enshittification concept that Cory Doctorow talks about, where you have all these products that they've been around for a long time and they've just gotten worse over time because they don't provide enough value back, and the experience is bad.
And it does resonate so much with my thoughts too as well, because I feel like we as designers also are a bit to blame for it, because efficiency has been one of the keywords where every designer for the last, I guess, decade almost was focusing so heavily on reusable components, design systems, operational improvements, the rise of design operations discipline. Like all of it was businessified, or like for us to run as smooth as possible and as predictable and as measurable and as fast as less costly. I feel like that has to do a lot of with that and shitification of the things, because you end up with a pick and mix of source where people can just go and independently self-serve and create experience which might not be as tested, researched, validated, human-friendly, like all of those things. That's where my kind of, I guess, spicy take is that a lot of the people are actually taking themselves out of their roles eventually, especially because a lot of that information can be used for AI training too, if we get back to that topic. But, you have to be kind of so careful to what do you look at and where do you sell your time? Because, you eventually exchange it to possibly not ideal outtake.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I'm literally this week teaching my advanced interaction design students design systems, and that's one of the things that I'm saying to you, like, hey, you can make these great looking UIs that are terrible. You can make things that look awesome but are terrible because there's no thought behind them. There's no strategy behind it. No one wants that. And the UX is just bad. So it makes it very easy to like skip over the actual design process and go straight to the interface making part of it. And so, I think you're right. I think it's operationalized it to the point where it is so easy that you will see people that are in PM roles or exec roles. Oh yeah, I just went into the Figma, thing and snap this thing together, and here it is. Can we just build this? Yeah, but this doesn't work, or this doesn't meet user needs, or what were we even trying to accomplish here?
It takes a bit of a skill. Everybody can play with Legos, but not everybody can construct like a Death Star of a proper designed experience, so to speak. But that's awesome. Are you okay to talk about your book? Because some of those themes I saw in your chapter you published on your newsletter, very interesting too. But are you good for us to dive into it a bit?
Sure. So I'm working with John Zimmerman and Jody Ferlizzi here at the HCII, and I'm coming at it as like someone who's done some AI work, but they have been researching AI and design, they and their PhD students, for like the last 10 years. So they're like the experts. They know like everything, and they're kind of like, oh, well, welcome to the party. We've been here for a while. And so they're like, well, here's what we know. Here's all the good stuff that we've been researching for a long time. And the book is kind of about how do you actually look for situations where AI is valuable, but only with kind of moderate to immediate moderate level performance. So what we mean by that is like, how do you find these sweet spaces where if AI guesses wrong, it doesn't mean you were accidentally diagnosed with cancer, or a self-driving car smashes into a pedestrian. How do you find these sweet spots where you can do like these small things that are really valuable to people, but are also low risk. So a great example of this is the transcripts on your phone, like your voicemail transcripts. Like they're about 80 to 90% correct, but it's just enough that you can get the gist of it and be like, oh, maybe I should listen to this, or oh, that's a spam call, like get rid of it. So how do you find those kinds of opportunities, and then how do you insert those opportunities into existing products or new products? Then how do you do these kind of consequence scanning and checks to make sure that, oh, hey, if this does guess wrong, like how do you mitigate those errors? Because I think a lot of designing for AI is actually designing around the error possibilities for it. So that's kind of what the book is about. So they've been developing this kind of method for like 4 or 5 years now, kind of putting all these pieces together. This is basically the class that they have been teaching and that I've been teaching for the last year, kind of in book form. And so it's really it's really a kind of counter to the message right now, which is AI is like this super magical thing that's going to do all these amazing things. And our take is, no, AI is actually kind of dumb, but it's still valuable. So what can we use that value for? So that's kind of what the book is about, how designers and product managers can start to find those opportunities, and then how to talk to data scientists, basically, to figure out like how to make these things real. There's a lot of that kind of thing too, like how to work with data scientists and just how to speak the language of AI, because it's so confusing. There's a lot of terminology, like, oh, what's deep learning and how does it relate to machine learning? What NPL is Gen AI, NLP. Even I'm messing up the acronym right now, but it's like there's a million different things, like, oh, how do we measure performance? What's a feature? Oh, a feature is something. A feature is not what we think of as features. A feature is something that's pulled out of data. What's that? So there's a lot of terminology. There's a big terminology gap too that the book is trying to help overcome.
And that's perfect. I think it's well needed as well, because I don't find enough resources online on anything AI, or it's quite superficial. It still puts designers, I guess, in a back seat instead of being like a co-pilot or not a driver. I guess you cannot be a driver because it's still so technical, but influence is well needed. Like, what is your, I guess, take on like how could people, before we even would reach to that book or they would actually get it, like how could they position themselves better? Do you have any advice for, I guess, UX designers who are potentially dabbling or maybe trying something out? Like I've seen some of the cases in my community where people end up reskinning really the ChatGPT or embedding it as a chat bot or as a conversational design piece in some sort of app, and then I guess calling it a day. But do you have anything which anyone could use, right now, or get better with working with those things?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that I do that maybe are helpful to other people. So I subscribe to like 3 or 4 like AI newsletters, and so I just get these newsletters that are mostly daily newsletters, and they have definitely helped me to like just get used to the terminology. For one thing, and two, it lets me know kind of what the state of the art is, like what is possible. When I want to suggest something that uses AI, I have an idea of, oh, this is possible, or this is easily done, versus this is something that is cutting edge, like, on the edge of what is possible. You want something that's like, hey, I know that we can easily do this. So one example here is like predictive text is a great example. Like, why doesn't Instagram have predictive text for hashtags? Why do people have to constantly write every hashtag out by hand when you could have predictive text? Or Twitter, same deal. That is something that's a capability that is very well tested, very easy to make. It's not hard, and it would be valuable to people. So being able just to understand I mean, we talk a lot about like caring less about what we call the mechanisms of AI, which are like the different kinds of models, like diffusion models, or those kinds of optimizers, or caring less about that stuff, which is kind of the purview of data scientists, and caring more about capabilities. And it's like, well, we know that AI is pretty good about being able to predict the next couple words of text. And even if it doesn't do it well, it's not that big of a drain. It's not that big of a risk. Once you take out some, the offensive words and other things like that, it's not that big of a risk to be able to add it and have it be valuable in places. So that would be what I would do. Kind of if I was like how do I start getting into this? Is really start looking at kind of industry newsletters around AI. So like today, for instance, I just saw a thing that Chrome is offering some new AI things built into Chrome, which are clustering tabs to make it easier to navigate Chrome. And I'm like, that's really interesting. That could really be an interesting feature. Now, I don't have it yet because it hasn't rolled out to me yet, but I'm like a tabaholic. I have like 30 or 40 tabs open at any given time. And so I'm like, oh, that could really help my workflow if done well. And so looking for things like that like are announcing, like, well, if it can cluster tabs, that means that the capability is it can understand kind of what the context is. And so how might I apply that to whatever product I'm working on? We know, for instance, AI is great about creating, lists based on, various different kinds of clusters and stuff like that. Well, how could you use that in your product? Like, are there places where that might work well? So it's just kind of thinking about AI at like the capabilities level will help designers, because they could go and be like, hey, did you see that Chrome clustering thing? What if we did that, with our, I don't know, media or, tasks or something like that, that were like, hey, in our software, we could use a similar thing. What if we did that?
Especially, I guess, people who are just coming into UX, they feel like there's some sort of eureka moment and you come up with something which works, or you just copy. But there's also this, immense, I guess, like a virtual folder you create of things, or other solutions which are done, or the art of possibilities, and then you let it converge. Because the best ideas as well, like working with, let's say myself, I worked with a lot of data scientists for years now, and we worked on machine learning solutions and things of that nature. I kind of was very humbled because I would try to drive too much in a way sometimes, and I wouldn't facilitate that exchange because everybody has their own takes on the things, and it's almost like the opposite challenge where you maybe don't feel like you contribute enough, and then you try to drive too much, and the partnerships you can create. But it's almost it does come out to that where you have to have enough of signals to then call it out and say, hey, I have this flag, maybe this is going to make sense, and then kind of converge with other people, because people who implement also have like usually a lot of those ideas, and the users too. I'm sure if Chrome did their research, which I hope they did, they probably talked to, they talked to maybe Dan somewhere else, or like someone like totally different person who maybe has the same needs or problems as you did, and then that down the road kind of flourished into this project, which is probably going to be useful, but you also never know probably until you test it.
Right. But, I mean, if the there's the concept, right? Like, oh, hey, why don't we cluster tabs? And then there's the implementation, which is like, wow, these clusters are absolutely useless to me. That they mean nothing. Like, if the clustering is bad, then the product fails. Like, oh well, I guess I'll switch off that feature. Like, I won't use that. But yes, I mean, it is hard to, especially when you're starting out, to kind of figure out to what level can I drive, or can I push this project? Because you don't understand the limits of the model. You don't understand like where like how difficult something is compared to something else. So that's where having an understanding of, hey, I've seen this in a lot of places. This feels doable, versus just pulling something magic out and being like, oh, well, what if the AI can schedule, my airline flight with, I want $500 and I wanted to, I want to go to this city and this, like all these like very complex things. And it's like, well, that's intensely difficult. And,
could be a vision though, as a vision type.
Sure.
Yeah, but you kind of then would need to walk back and see what makes sense. One of the things which I saw in, you shared the chapter on your newsletter, and I think one of the quotes, if I could pull out, was very, very, very topical, and I think it would be interesting to hear your thoughts. But you said, and of course I'm gonna paraphrase this, so pardon if I didn't take it right, but interestingly, successful AI projects like, and this is you quoting, I think, Airbnb example of smart pricing, are usually more accidental than intentional. In fact, almost all AI projects fail, as you mentioned before. Most fail quietly before launch. Why is that the case?
Most of them fail just because, either the data is bad, the model is bad, and if you do user testing on it, people hate it. There's all different kinds of reasons that an AI thing could fail. Like it's too expensive. Like, oh, we built this thing, but we'll never be able to get our money back on it.
That's so typical. That's so typical.
Right? Yeah. I mean, in my design for AI class right now, we're actually talking about money. Like, why do we talk about money in the design for AI class? I'm like, well, because these things are expensive to run. We had one of our PhD students left a little project on running over the weekend and came back to like a $10,000 bill in processing fees. And it's like, oh my God, like there's a real cost to developing these things. And so when you are proposing these ideas, you have to figure out, like, is this going to pay for itself in maintenance? Right now, everyone's talking about that new Rabbit AI device.
Yeah.
And they're saying like, oh, even the heaviest users, it'll cost us like $15 a month. It's like, yeah, but you sold the device for $200 and said no subscription fee ever. So $15 a month, like, let's say the device only costs $50, which probably something like that. So you've only got like, so that's only 10 months of working, before you're losing money on each device.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Unless they add ads or some sort of other monetization mechanism. Have you actually seen the demo? I noticed on Twitter the other day, are in the wild, and
Yes.
the delay was
yes, of
20
course.
seconds or something along those lines, and that just, I was like, yes, this is, why is this not unexpected? Because this is exactly what we are dealing, like the actual processing power and the actual demo, what was demos of a product versus reality, is likely going to maintain the same, I guess, challenges, and then you almost lose all the value to it. Like there is almost no value if you're going to have to wait on a simple invocation, and you're going to, it's like I would ask Dan you a question now, and then I receive an answer after like minutes of wait time.
Right. We talk about this a lot in the design for AI class, because because students are always proposing things like, hey, like live translation and these kinds of things. And it's like, well, that's very expensive, and how, the processing is going to a cloud and coming back, and, how is it being presented? And, is there a delay for all this stuff? And and how much of a delay will people tolerate before the user experience is so bad that there's no desirability anymore? It's like, well, that's right. And you can't just have these 5-10 second delays in conversation. That is completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the one thing that Amazon did so right with Alexa, where it was, hey, it has to be responsive instantly. It has to respond, and it has to respond quickly within less than, I forget what the measurement was, but it was enough that it was like, oh wow, hey, this really works.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I would even challenge because we owned at home here. I think we owned a couple of Alexas, one bigger one and one smaller. But even then, I think the response time was okay, but it was always a bit jolting, where you kind of had to learn that you're gonna wait like half a second or a brief moment until, and I think there was visual cues. There was a bit of there was it was by design, I guess, made best it could be with the technical limitations. But as a user, I guess you knew what you were getting because it was so novel, but you also had to almost like behavioral change and be okay with that. But yeah, I'm with you. It's such a good
yeah,
example of like how could you what could be good, what could good enough look like compared to what we what certainly doesn't work, and not to crap on Rabbit R1 or those devices, but
sure.
it's a long way to go to be usable.
But I think this is, I think this is one of the things that, as we're talking about this, it's like, well, there's all this aesthetics and experience level things that most product managers are not really trained to think about. And so when we go back to our previous discussion about like, hey, are all, product managers going to be designing these things? Maybe not, because they're not trained to think about these kinds of things. I mean, these things do appear, but if you can catch them early and design for them faster, you may have a better time of launching your product.
Yeah, it seems like there has to be a bit of due diligence to know how viable that is. Or some products are also way too early. Like I think this Rabbit device is just technically likely gonna be either very underwhelming or it needs some, I don't know, quantum computing before
Yeah, yeah. It's
before it
funny.
can be that.
I saw I saw Tony Fadell speak. The iPod guy and yeah, the Nest guy, and he was saying he never worries about being too late to market. He always worries about being too early to market. And I really thought about that. I was like, oh yeah, I really took that to heart. Like that makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, if you don't have the right combination of speed and processing power and those kinds of things, it just has no user adoption to it, or just a limited user adoption to it. And so knowing those and being able to judge those things are, I think, a huge, that's design decision. We
Mm.
talk about look and feel, that's the feel part of look and feel. Like, how does it feel
Yeah,
to use it?
yeah,
I think
definitely.
I think we forget about feel a lot in look and feel. That's kind of why I wrote the micro interactions book, because the micro interactions book, I think,
Such a great read.
was a
Yeah.
lot about feel, right? Was about like, how do you make things seem like their quality? Well,
Mm.
not seem be quality, but how do you think about things being quality? Like even just a button push, or I mean,
Yeah.
the iPhone, would not have worked, if there was a lag. Each time you press an icon, if there was a second lag, it would have
Yeah.
felt super clunky.
That's I guess how iPhone got ahead, because you probably remember the touch devices from like Samsung and stuff, and
Yeah, totally.
they've been underperforming on that micro interactive. But one challenge to that, I guess, or maybe not so much. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But one of the quotes, again, I'm going to borrow from your from chapter. You wrote that AI can be successful with moderate performance as long as it is valuable and low risk for users and organizations. How did you mean by that? I guess because some people maybe who are going to hear this, they're going to be like, oh yeah, but Rabbit R1 is like moderate performance or low performance, low risk as well, for users who adopt it, maybe low risk for organizations who sold it already and sold out.
Sure. I mean, I guess the idea is to find places where the AI does not have to be entirely accurate. There's a lot of AI that is trying to do these very challenging things that are currently done by experts. So things that,
Mm.
like even driving a car, there is some level of expertise that is involved in doing that. Driving a car through city streets, we make people get driver's licenses to do that. So there's a lot of people chasing those kind of very hard problems when there are things that are AI based, that just have low risk to them, or are just moderate. If the AI is guessing wrong, it doesn't cause a lot of issues to it. So a couple examples. Spotify just launched this thing in fall called Daylist. Creates these micro genre playlists. That's really interesting. I really enjoy, so every day it like looks at like what you've played during that day and pulls from its database and literally makes a little sentence that says something like, lazy Sunday, heavy metal jam band or something like that. That's like, oh, this is kind of what you listen to, and we're going to make this playlist, which again, moderate performance. They probably had most of the tech off the shelf, and high value to me because it helps me discover new music, and low risk to them, like, okay, well, and low risk to me, the user, like, oh, if I don't like a song, well, I just skip it. It's not a big deal. Another example is how, Netflix, the icons for movies and movie posters, they alter to be interesting to you in particular. So that kind of stuff is like, oh, well, that's super low risk, and and could be valuable to me again because it helps me discover things. And and moderate performance. It doesn't need to. It's not like it's not trying to do a moonshot. It's just trying to create covers out of all the pieces of things that it currently has, and just assembles them in a way that will be pleasing for me, that's personalized for me. So things like that is what the book is really trying to find, those opportunities, rather than, hey, let's use AI to do medical imaging, or hey, let's replace your doctor with AI. Those things are possible. I don't want to say that they're impossible, but they're extremely challenging, and so you're leaving a lot of AI value on the table by doing that. There's a lot of things that AI can be helping with. Tab clustering, that don't rely on these very complex systems that are risky to both users and the business. How many bad AI projects find themselves on the front page of the New York Times or something, like just bad PR, and you're like, oh my God, how did this get out the door? Like, so embarrassing.
Yeah, I think it's also linked to, I guess, deeply experimental nature of it too, because a lot of it, to me at least, when it comes to AI projects right now, they're all experiments, and they might become these bigger initiatives or projects, but they all start, I guess, it's still very early. Like, we're just scratching the surface, especially from UX perspective as well, and trying to chase it too, and and almost not get left behind.
Definitely when we talk about generative AI, I mean, that is extremely new ground, right? That is like, we are definitely still experimenting and learning what it's good for. I don't think we exactly know all the things that it's good for now. We know it can do some things really well, but what it will eventually be good for is going to be really interesting, particularly as we start to apply more UX to the to the wrappers around these things. Where, I mean, right now they're like, type in a prompt, push the button, and 20 or 30 seconds something comes back that seems sort of like what I'm interested in. It's like really giving an intern a job and having them go do something, and then having them come back the next day and be like, here it is. It's like, no, this isn't what I wanted. Can you try this again? Okay, I'll see you tomorrow.
And surprisingly, the things are also getting progressively worse, at least from my experience using ChatGPT. But maybe that's my observation, but I feel like it's not at the same level as it used to be. And it's likely because of, again, viability, the cost of running it, all those factors where I believe that I'm getting the light version of the models using ChatGPT today as compared to what they used to get. Anyways, it has been, such a great chat. I think one last thing, if I could just get a couple of minutes of extra of your
Sure.
time, I'm gonna get back to where we started, and it's the UX disciplines framework. I wonder if you would change it anyhow today, or like what would you do to further enhance it given the times or where the industry is?
One of the things that I left off one of the original drawing I think that I did, and I mean hilariously, I did this drawing, probably in 10 or 15 minutes, and yeah, it's going to be on my tombstone or in my obituary or something. Like that drawing follows me forever. But I left out content, and I really think that was probably a mistake. Like some products are nothing without the content that's in them, and so how much are we involved in the designing of the actual content that gets placed in the wrappers that we make for these things? But it's interesting, having worked at places like Twitter, where it's like you have to be very agnostic about what goes in there, because it could be a president threatening nuclear war, or it could be a funny cat video. I think some of the social and psychology pieces are probably missing, network effects and stuff like that. That definitely and group dynamics and those kinds of things that I think have definitely been left out of the diagram, that I think could also definitely fit into there, like cultural studies. And well, I mean, maybe the other one is economics. I mean, getting back, the business,
Interesting.
the business model, I think, as we've seen in the last 10 years, affects the user experience. If it's a paid subscription versus an advertising based service, it's totally different. The experience of it is very different. Although it's funny now that, that even things that are paid subscriptions now, I feel like I get advertising in those too. Because again, everyone's trying to squeeze the last bit of value out of users, or they did the pricing wrong. The streaming service costs us more than we thought. Shocking. Okay, we can't raise prices again for the third time this year. Can we let's just add ads in there? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I think maybe stuff like that is economics
Yeah.
and business models.
It does make sense. I think it also telling of UX industry hiring as well, because you get job ads in UX which specifically state, let's say, SaaS experience, or
Yes.
a product PLG or sales, like a lot of the different keywords which basically make a very different experience, like depending on what do you want to achieve. So I definitely it resonates a lot. But Dan, it's been such a pleasure, and I'm really appreciative of your time. Where could people find more about you?
I'm no longer on Twitter. I'm on Threads now. So I'm at Dan Saffer on Threads. I have a permanent website, odannyboy.com is always there. And at Carnegie Mellon, I teach at the HCII, the Human-Computer Interaction Institute. And so you can find me at CMU.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan.
This has been great. This has been fun.